Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up this week with a creator request, which is where a smaller band or artist gets in contact with me and personally asks me to check out their stuff. Today we have something from the Ciem show. I got an email that said, I saw your Special Defects reaction video. I did a prog metal album years ago that's heavily inspired by Meshuggah as far as syncopations and atonal riffing go, but way more melodic lines, especially with the vocal arrangements. I'm not a schooled musician personally, but I've worked with great composers. Here's a link to a song I think you may like. It's some fun prog metal stuff. So, let's dive into this. The title of all this is very proggy. The album is Lifelike Scenes. The track is Scene 2, Evolutionary Sickness, and it's comprised of two movements, existing without being and being without existing. So, let's dive into this and see what the Ciem show is bringing to us today. It feels like we're in 4/4, but really weird phrasing. Really love that sound off on the right. Very reverby and loud acoustic sounds, contrasting heavily with the heavy, weighty stuff we have on the guitar. Yeah, the key shift with the falsetto is, into this eerie vibe. Yeah, to reset the rhythm with those frequent accents. Shifting to a 3. This is actually a solid formula right here. We'll talk about it in a bit. Solid. Give me the heartbeat, but not accent pattern. Oh man, accenting offbeats without a heartbeat. Getting real tricky there. Yeah. Yeah, so we got an asymmetric time going on. Yeah, so we're working on 11. What is this, 11-4? Man, the layers. I think that's... We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. Interesting. We've got these 16th note ideas on two guitars. The dyads are going in all sorts of directions. The very first recommendation on this is for Mr. Bugle Track. I can kind of see that. Okay, so on the surface, yes, this is, you'd certainly say that this is inspired by Meshuggah and Djent as a whole. There are certainly a lot of elements in here that are based around texture and rhythm. A lot of our underlying guitar ideas, the drum work rhythmically, not texturally. The drums are an interesting case. Uh, the time signatures, they're all very disjointed. Time gets played around with a lot, and we end up with really interesting time signature combinations that present us situations where, well, even in 4/4, we get presented with situations like this where the phrasing is asymmetrical and thus disjointed, and it sounds like we are constantly starting a phrase early or sticking around with a phrase for too long, or just anything that feels out of sync with a standardized symmetrical time signature. Or I should say, in a different phrase, a symmetrical phrasing. We can have odd time signatures that feel natural if the phrasing takes account for it. And we end up having ideas that go across bar lines in order to take an unusual or take an odd time signature and make it feel like an even phrasing by having an extended amount of bars to go with it until we hit an even amount of beats for the phrase and divide that in half, such as if we're in 7/4, 7 is asymmetric, but 2 bars of 7 is 14. That is symmetric. We can divide that right down the middle. Here, though, none of that affordance. Everything feels odd. Everything feels disorienting. We're constantly playing around with phrasing and time signature and polymetric ideas in order to create rhythmic grooves that never allow the listener to feel like they are ever on solid ground. At any moment, they could trip and fall or be launched into anti gravity. There are certainly moments in here where I was expecting a phrase to end and then it just didn't, and then didn't, and then didn't. And then, oh, we're back at the beginning of are we at the beginning of a phrase? Was part of this repeated element that felt like we weren't going anywhere the beginning of a phrase? Like, I had so many questions. I never quite knew, I never had a ledge to grasp onto, is what I'm saying here. Whether we were jumping into phrases early or hanging on to phrases for too long. I never really felt like I had a strong understanding of what we were doing at any given point in here, which is just, it's very djenty. That's the whole thing of it. There is usually a sense of groove in a lot of these sections that you can latch onto if you're listening closely enough, or if you just can innately feel that. There are quite a few sections where we have a cymbal giving us a beat in the background of it all. That doesn't quite line up with what everything else is doing, but is symmetrical and rigid. It's every, second and a half or whatever. And it doesn't feel like it fits anything else, but it is this core rhythm that doesn't change, this heartbeat to the song that you can lean into. They're not always there. Some of these sections were designed to be completely arrhythmic, to just have no sense of where ground is, of where down is throughout this track. But most of them tended to have some sort of heartbeat present somewhere in the track for you to latch onto and groove with, even if you didn't understand what was actually happening rhythmically. So yeah, on the surface, we have something very djenty or djent inspired. I'm curious, this came out in 2015? Nope, released on 2010. 2015 is when the video was released. That's yeah, when that would have been not too long after man, let me look this up. That wouldn't have been too long after Periphery's first one. I'm also curious about Meshuggah. Kind of get a time frame for this because that seems very early. And so Periphery formed in 05 and debuted their first album in 2010. So Bulb would have been circulating the internet around this time to influence them. What about Meshuggah? So Meshuggah's older than that. Much. Oh, geez. Meshuggah's first one was 91. Given their. I mean, granted, I've only heard possibly a newer sound of theirs. I'm going through these albums in order. um. So it looks like possibly my first introduction to them would have been something off of their '08 album. That's the early. Yeah, so I haven't heard their old stuff. So maybe it is a little different. Um, maybe they do have eras or phases. Um, so I don't really have a strong area to put this in. It certainly came out around the same time, maybe even prior to Periphery's first one, which makes it really interesting because I was going to draw some parallels to what Periphery did, and why I enjoy Periphery and not other Djent bands. But yeah, this might predate that, which is very cool. And if I haven't made it clear yet, I'm probably going to be checking the rest of this album out. Um, which is pretty much their only album. They have a 2-track EP. Maybe. Nope. They were part of a dual track release. They put one track on it and another band put a track on it and they released it as the two of them. Kind of like the sampler discs that like Fearless? Eyeless? No, it's Eyeless, right? Anyways, one of those like punk adjacent record companies would put like sampler discs out. That's what this kind of reminds me of. And then this Lifelike Scenes is their only album out. Entirely self-funded, recorded and produced back in 2010. All right. Let's get back into this cuz that just kind of blows my mind. Where I was going with this though is that because I was trying to like figure out where this is placed alongside the whole thing with Djent, because Djent is this highly rhythmic staccato technical metric playing, right? And it doesn't quite work for me on its own. I don't mind djenty ideas paired with other things, but just having pure technical rhythmic elements is usually impressive, but not something I'm going to listen to. That's where I sit with a lot of Meshuggah. It's interesting to listen to once and be like, wow, that's the endurance and the raw mathematics that went into this is cool, but it it loses some of the, man, how do I say this without upsetting Meshuggah fans? Soul. It's very technical, very mechanical, right? It's missing the oomph, the soul that I like with music. And that's not to say it's soulless. It just tends to be on the colder side of composition. Very mathematical and technical. And so what drew me to Periphery, especially later Periphery, was that they took this rhythmic idea and used it as a foundation to build off of rather than the main attraction, which, especially with stuff like Clockworks and Bleed, maybe Meshuggah has tracks that build on it, but those two that I've been introduced to, it is the main attraction. It's what you have to be there for, is that raw texture and rhythmic component. So this does that same thing, though. The rhythmic staccato, hyper disruptive rhythmic ideas, I said rhythmic twice, are the foundation of the song. They sit underneath everything else. And I literally mean everything else. It isn't just one thing above it. We have clean vocals that do have compression on them. We also have some harsh vocals in here, but primarily we have these clean vocals. We have guitar lines, melodies that fit over it. We have textures. I think they were also guitars that fit over it. We end up having this 16th note uh, guitar duet thing near the end that was that well near the end of the first movement that was really interesting. There's all these ideas that get played over this rhythmic idea. So what it does is it introduces this jagged groove for melodic and harmonic elements to be played over, so you can get the emotional story from the chords, and you can get the emotional story from the melodies, and the vocals aren't just more textural rhythmic stuff. They also have harmonic elements. And then we end up looking at the drums, and they, like I had mentioned, aren't just the rhythmic component. There's a melodic drumming element here where the drummer is not very concerned with being a metronome. A lot of the drumming is rhythmically going along with what the guitars are doing with this staccato djent stuff, but it's not just bass kick, toms, and snare. There are a lot of really neat ways that the different parts of the drum kit are utilized in sequence to produce something that sounds melodic rather than purely rhythmic. So we still get that hyper rhythmic idea, but it's delivered in something that feels more like pitched composition. And I think that's awesome. I love melodic drumming. Uh, and this is just taking it to the next level where it's technical on so many levels, and it sort of bridges the rhythmic technical stuff of our foundation with the melodic stuff in our is there a word for above the foundation? There has to be, right? In the rest of the track. Um, and so it doesn't really do the melodic element very well because of course drums are pitched, but it's not as open-endedly pitched like a guitar or a trumpet or vocals. Um, and we don't typically tune a drum kit in that way. So that's why I call it the bridge. It kind of it does the rhythmic stuff, but it also kind of does the melodic stuff, and it sits between the two worlds. So the melodic stuff can be awesome, the rhythmic stuff can be awesome, and it does this phenomenal job of doing both at the same time. It's the only instrument that does that, and it's phenomenal that it's the drum kit and not something else. These rhythmic ideas on the bottom, the guitar work, they do play around with notes, but they're not super melodic. A lot of the note choices are within the same 4 to 5 notes. It's all in the same range. It's that lower end stuff. And I feel like the note changes are purely well, it kind of leans back to that texture. If it was just one note, it'd be monotonous. So let's not make it one note. That kind of idea. It's the melody, the notes chosen aren't as important as the fact that the notes are changing. And so we get to the top half here, and we have textures, right? There's these moments where I don't know if it's tremolo picking or if it's just the guitar strumming and allowing itself to ring out for as long as they can, but you've also got your distortion, your amplification, all this stuff. So, I mean, guitars can ring out for a long time after you've put them through all this. And it's pushed out to the side. It sort of envelops the song, and you get this really nice warmth around the track while also providing this chord, right? So you have your chordal idea, or I would even say maybe a home bass. It doesn't change. It doesn't have a progression to it, but it is the home sound. And everything else is built on top of that. And as our chord progression changes in some of our other guitars, as the melody shifts between notes in a lead guitar or in our vocals, those distances are all based off of this home note, this home chord we have, and we can feel how it moves around and within the chord that's been given to us on the outskirts here. And those are going to inform the emotional resonance of the track. And so we have something that is rich on a harmonic level, but it's also rich on a rhythmic level. And it just comes across so well. Everything works perfectly together. And then you have these super passionate vocals put on top of them, delivered with so much power and passion and intent. So much so that we even get a little bit of that harshness dipped in there every once in a while. It's handled very well, and we get to see series of this type of composition stacking of how this is composed. We get a snippet of it here, and then here, and then here, and there's so many sections. I think it's a linear song. I didn't hear much repetition of ideas, at least musically. Um, and we just get a good 4 or 5 minutes of this linear songwriting of saying, this is how we're going to stack up our track. Let's write a riff here. Let's write a riff here. Let's write a riff here. Let's write a riff here, and stack things off of it. And, if something's not working for you, there's going to be something new around the corner. Granted, it's going to be based off of the same ideas, but usually you stick around for 45 seconds or so, about a minute, you'll hear something new. Maybe it'll be something you enjoy. That is the first movement. Now, this is really interesting because we did dip into a little bit of darkness near the end of this first movement, but we pulled back out of it to finish off with something that felt closer to how we started the track harmonically, atmosphere-wise. This darkness, though, I don't think it made much sense in the context of the first movement, but as a foreshadowing of what comes in the second movement, it did a phenomenal job of, because our second movement begins with dark, tense ambience. We do eventually get into some really heavy guitar and drum work, looking at some really dark atmospheres in that. But I really like the first minute and a half, the first, 50-60% of the song, with this dark ambient tone that is just these long held out notes. It was such a departure, and it was just, the thing is too, is that up until the last, 30-40 seconds when we hit some more of the traditional guitar riffs, up until that point it felt very alien, especially compared to what came before it. In contrast, it's drastically different, but it also has this element of I don't know, we got some tones and some textures in there that I can't say I've heard before. It might just be the way that some of the textures were working together. And there's a lot of, if I remember correctly, what is it? Fluid movement between notes as well. Just very alien sounding. And I think it's really interesting. The track is called Being Without Existing. Existing without being, our first movement, is something that I think all of us have probably experienced at one time, even if you didn't have the words to put it in. It's the concept of simply being present. My body is here, but I don't feel like I've been, right? I don't feel like I've lived. It could be, a week of just like doing, 10, 11, 12 hour shifts, and you wake up and you go to work and you come home and you go to sleep, and it's just like you didn't feel like you were living for that week. It was just a really tough work week. You existed for sure, but were you being, right? And I think we've all kind of felt that. That is a human experience, I think. Being without existing, what does that even mean? How can you be present in a life that doesn't exist? This is a very alien topic, at least to me. I can't wrap my mind around this phrase in something that would be something I could even imagine. This almost feels uh, like on another plane, right? Another plane of existence. Well, it can't be another plane of existence. This is lacking existence. Like, what does that even mean? To lack existence but still be? Yeah, that just makes no sense to me. And I think the music reflecting that horror, that terror, that fear, that dread of the unknowing did a phenomenal job of it. Um, which kind of, oh, I hadn't thought about this. It's really neat showcase here of how we have a composer who can create music that is both kinetic, rhythmically intense, melodically intense, really focusing on the moment to moment and how that changes, but also showcase something that can hyperfixate on ambient sounds to induce a very specific emotion through very minute changes. Very different from the drastic changes in contrast we had in the first movement. Um, yeah, just really great display there. I'm going to hit the lyrics right here. We'll see what's going on, and then we'll wrap this up. This one goes a little over my head. There seems to be an overall negativity to it, though. It starts off words unspoken and thoughts that echo in the mind, overriding self contemplation, feed the obsession, see the world without reflection. I'm so deep down in the hole. Um, kind of talks about larger ideas too. In the middle, it says the beginning of suffering, life is fading, but fate is tragedy, bound to fall just like every wave comes crashing down. Death is in every sound. What does one suppose would be heard in the words of ghosts and shadows of our imagination? Um, it seems to be speaking about a very experiential type of dread. Almost of the unknown, something on the other side, and fearing that, like having seen something beyond what our reality is and understanding it, and possibly being the only one who knows that, and trying to deal with the weight of that knowledge. The track ends with from the evident we've made phantoms of perception and truth, and I fear that tomorrow will be no different. Cold matter, voiceless gray, hereafter only to exist in dreams and fear. Yeah, I don't have a strong grasp of this at all, but I do get a real sense of negative negativity, dread, uh, fear. I mean, I know that's the last word. I don't know if I'm repeating it because of that, but there is something very the narrator's afraid of something. This is what I'm getting at. Um, and part of it seems to be that this world just isn't the reality we know just isn't it isn't what we perceive it to be. At least that's what I get out of it. Like I said, I don't have a real strong reading of it, anyways. And since I don't have a strong reading of the lyrics, I mean, at best I can touch on the emotional resonance I get out of it, which is that dread, it's that negativity. And I don't really feel that in the music. It is heavy, but I wouldn't say it's full of dread. It has a lot of energy to it, though. Forward momentum. It's always pushing forward. There's a real strong element of weight here. Confusion for sure. I'm confused about the lyrics. I'd say that my journey with the music fits my journey through the lyrics, but once I understood the lyrics, I don't know if I'd be able to make that tie anymore. So I don't know. If you have a read on the lyrics, or if you're the lyricist and you want to give me some insight, please let me know in the comment section. Above the comments, normally I'd put my links, but instead we're going to put a link, well, all the links that I can find for the Ciem show. If you want to check out more of their stuff and whatnot, their social medias, streaming platforms, anything I can find, I'll put in there for them. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Make sure you go and show them some love. Like, subscribe, heart, favorite, whatever area you get to of theirs. And you can show love however you can on those places. All right, that wraps it up for today. We got an album review tomorrow. We got the stream on Sunday morning for patrons. I'll try to have that out on Sunday evening, EST, for all of this, by the way, for everyone else. And then Monday we'll start next week's theme, which is one-man bands. Yep. I don't remember. I don't remember if I had a stipulation on that. One person bands. I don't know if that means it has to be. I actually don't know. I know everything in there is going to be single person projects. I don't know what kind of music we're listening to though. Might have a nice mix of electronic and rock. Might just be straight rock and metal. I don't know. Anyways, until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.